this video, we'll take a detailed look at the material and capacity planning capabilities of the APS. And this is really where the true advanced planning and scheduling capabilities of this system start to come into play, where we're evaluating not only the capacity constraints and rules for creating the production schedule, but we're also able to take a look at independent demands in the form of sales orders and forecasts below through the entire product structure in terms of the bills of material, supplies and demands of inventory, all the way from finished goods through intermediate or work in process types of items through raw materials that you may be purchasing as well. So the APS is fully capable of generating a production plan based on your available supplies and demands. And I'll walk you through some of the basic screens first before we start looking at some of the scenarios to generate the plan in the first place. Now, as you know, in the APS there are several different ways you can look at the same production plan, and we're starting this video on the inventory plan screen, where basically I've got it filtered down here to look at a particular warehouse just for a few sample items that I'm interested in planning for. Great thing about a grid like this is right away I can see where I might have some exceptions. So right now I've just loaded in my independent demands for my finished goods, my inventory positions, and so I have a couple of exceptions here in my warning area that I want to try to resolve for those finished goods. So I can expand the details for a particular finished good anytime that I want, and on this item and warehouse focused type of a view, now I can start to see the overall plan. I'm looking at weekly buckets here. Basically those are the sizes of my columns, and in the first week I don't have any sales orders or forecasts coming in, and my net inventory at the end of that week will be 1,000 based on my on-hand quantity, which you can see above. In the following week, in week number 2, I have some sales orders and some forecasts coming in for this item. I'm not doing any forecast consumption logic here, so if I start with 1,000 on-hand finished goods in the first week and I'm consuming down 2,000, that's where I'm getting that exception of I'll have a net balance at the end of that week of negative 1,000, which is what I want to try to resolve using the material planning capabilities, and I'll show you how I can do that right away. The rows going across here show you the sources of your demands and supplies, so things like independent demand in the form of a sales order or a forecast have their own row. What you'll see for work in process items are those get consumed as what we call job materials, so that dependent demand that's generated as a result of trying to feed materials through the entire process is tracked too. Things in the form of supply in terms of being able to produce items or transfer them in potentially are also going to be tracked here, so you get that full time-phased inventory plan as part of your capacity plan as well. Before I go ahead and generate the plan too, I'll show this from the purchased item point of view. You can see here on the finished good, it is something that we produce. For the raw material item, of course, that's something that we would purchase, and you can see that I actually have a purchase order. Although I have zero on-hand balance right now, that PO is scheduled to come in that second week for 10,000 units of this item. For any item and warehouse combination in the APS, you're able to drill into those details anytime you like. So if I came up here and just double-clicked on an item name, I can take a look graphically at the inventory profile here on the top and see the details of what's going on with that item too. So I can see that I start with zero on-hand balance, then I have a purchase order, and the purchase order number here is just PO1, and that's coming in at 1 a.m. on August 9th according to my schedule. So you can drill into those details anytime you like. I'm going to use these supplies and demands to actually go ahead and generate the schedule, and the way that we do that is using the same optimization that you might have seen in some other videos to generate the production schedule. Before I generate that, I think it's worth taking a look at the options that you have available. So right next to that button, I can go to my options tab, open up my material planning capabilities, and these are some of the basic settings that you want to think about. Now, of course, in an actual implementation, it's worth thinking through how you want to plan materials, what the proper rules for that capability would be. So there's basically two different ways that customers have a way of handling materials. If you're already doing MRP in your business system, a lot of times it makes sense to preserve that process in place while you're implementing an APS just for the capacity side of things. That works very well in many cases, but if you're looking to improve on your material planning capabilities as well, this might be worth taking a look, where now you're really capturing the material and capacity planning simultaneously. So one other thing I'm going to be doing that's a little bit uncommon in real life is I'm actually going to be regenerating my entire plan each time that I do this. So that's based on the checkboxes that I have here. But as I go ahead and create the plan, all I have to do is tell it to optimize, and I can actually do that right from this little pop-up window. So this is just the choice that I have. If I uncheck the box, there at the top, I'll just be doing capacity planning and scheduling like you've seen in some other videos. But here, the advantage of doing this is I can see right away here on my inventory plan that based on the constraints that I have from a material point of view right now, I've resolved that shortage that I had anticipated on my finished goods. Those warnings went away, but I've created a new exception on my finished good, on my purchased items. So let's take a look at what we fixed on the finished goods side of thing. In order to generate that, because we had that net demand of 2,000 in the following week, and we have 1,000 on hand to start in the first week, I only need to produce 1,000. Gives me a net inventory of 2,000 at the end of week 1, and I'm going to consume all of that down here in week 2. So we balance out pretty nicely based on the planning profile that's required there. And to get there, we also require some intermediate items too. So to produce that, we also generated work in the form of work in process items. And as I mentioned before, here I can see in order to produce that finished good, I have to make sure that I'm producing, first of all, that work in process item, which is in that very same week is going to get consumed in that finished good item. So you can see that at a summary level here on the grid. If I want to drill in and see that work in process detail right here, basically you can see it all happening based on not only your material requirements but your capacity schedule. So the APS generated this particular job or production order for the WIP item to produce 1,000 to put into inventory. That's a product coming out for this particular job. It was automatically generated, and that material is going to get consumed down as a material to produce a finished good basically right away. So I can see that from an inventory profile standpoint, that looks great. If I wanted to go and look at that on the Gantt chart, I can do that as well. In fact, why don't we just take a brief look there too. I can just go ahead and open up my graphical scheduling board. I can see here's my work in process items feeding into my finished goods items. If I click there, you get a nice graphical arrow illustrating the links between the production requirements as they're coming in. So that illustrates both from the material side of things, looking at it from that inventory plan perspective. I can also, one of the ways to look at the capacity point of view is on a graphical scheduling board, so I can see what production lines are actually scheduled to produce my items. Now back to the inventory plan, one thing that we have in terms of an exception right now would be on that item. And this is pretty common in actuality, where for items that you purchase, you might allow them to be a non-constraint on your schedule. So I'm just generating the requirements that, hey, in order to actually run those work in process items, I do require some materials to produce that. So I can trace which jobs are producing that, just like you saw in the WIP items. But because I have no on-hand balances and I don't have that purchase order coming in until the second week, I'm a little bit out of sync on my purchase items. Now that may be okay. I might have, in the case here, the flexibility to work with my vendors, maybe expedite that entire shipment or part of the shipment, maybe look at an alternate source and try to get that material requirement in for that first week. So a lot of times that does work out, but I'm going to show you here that you have choices about what is a constraint and what is not a constraint in the APS. So just for the sake of argument, I'm going to refresh my constraints here, simulating the capabilities of bringing in data from my host system. So as I go to my plan tab and refresh, the only thing that's going to change is that raw material being a constraint. So in a second or so here, that refresh will be completed, and what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and re-optimize based on those new constraints. So I'm changing inside of my system saying, hey, I've done my work with my vendor, there's no way we can expedite that shipment, so now I'm illustrating the case of the fact that that available supply is actually going to restrict what I can do. Just re-optimize around that new information, and you can see that in the end, although it is a constraint, things work out okay. Back from that material perspective on the raw material, if I open that up, I'm not going to consume that in the first week here. It is a constraint based on the refresh that I just did from my new information. So I am going to consume that down. I've rescheduled my production to that second week, but it turns out that not only do I end up being okay from the purchased item perspective, really didn't impact from an inventory perspective my finished goods point of view. But if I wanted to go back and look at that Gantt chart here, it turns out that I'm getting pretty close to having a problem on that first work in process and finished good item there. That's getting flagged in yellow now, indicating that I'm actually ahead of my due date, but just barely. That's what we call almost late in the APS. So just to illustrate the effect of some constraints on your schedule, both from the material and capacity side of things, they interact in real time. So as soon as new information is provided to the APS, you've got the information you need at your fingertips to look at and resolve exceptions in a variety of different ways. So this video was intended, again, just to introduce you to some of the basic material and capacity planning capabilities of the APS. I definitely encourage you to visit our website, find out some more information that might be helpful for you, and you're absolutely welcome to give us a call as well, talk through your specific scenarios and ideas too. Thanks again, and looking forward to hearing from you.